for us. So hello to everyone that joined, and thank you for registering and joining us today for this webinar, Driving Business Outcomes in Field Service with Augmented Reality. Today, you're going to hear from our panelists of experts at Neurostrategy, which is a solution provider partner of PTC, as well as see a demo of PTC's newest AR product, Euphoria Instruct. Augmented reality is still a very much emerging technology, in the market today. And the goal for you, or for all of our attendees, or however you're watching this, whether it be on demand or live, is for you to leave this webinar with a better understanding of how AR is helping service organizations address challenges and produce improved outcomes from the field all the way to the C-suite. Just some housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded and will be distributed after completion, as well as made available online. And we will have dedicated time to answer questions toward the end of the webinar. But as always, we encourage you to please ask away. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and the chat feature as well. So you can ask those throughout the session. It's going to be very discussion based. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Michael so he can introduce us to today's panelists, bring us through the agenda, and then start up the conversation. So Michael, it's all you.
All right, so thanks, Connor. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Mcgee. I am the GM for Neurostrategy. I'll be your host for the webinar. I'll give you a bit of an introduction. I've got over a decade of experience in research and business implementation of virtual environments in industry. The work has included virtual reality, but more recently, I've been focused on how AR is driving significant value in business and how it'll digitally transform many different companies and industries. Now, a bit about PTC and Neurostrategy, just in case you've never heard of them before. PTC was founded in 1985. It's a global software company headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. They offer a unique portfolio of CAD, PLM, IoT, and AR solutions that help merge the digital and physical worlds, and they're set to transform how everything around us is engineered, manufactured, and serviced. Neurostrategy is a technology company focused on digital and service transformation. It utilizes technologies such as IoT, Internet of Things, and augmented reality to transform companies so they can stay competitive in a really dynamic and complex world. So I'm going to walk you through a bit of the agenda today. We're going to walk through in the panel discussion, discuss some of the current business challenges in the service industry and operational settings. And then we're going to look at how AR is going to provide some solutions as well as some really measurable business outcomes to address those challenges. Then we're going to do a demo of Euphoria Instruct, which is one of the most advanced AR products and the newest AR products from PTC. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough and introduce our panelists today. So we've got Bill Drand and Dave Bonney, two of our industrial AR experts at Neurostrategy, and Anthony Garner, who's our AR expert from PTC. Bill has got 30 years of business experience. As a co-founder of Neurostrategy, Bill specializes in AR and IoT enablement for organizations of all sizes. His background in finance, technology, risk, and compliance gives him a unique viewpoint on designing the monetization strategies for these technologies. Dave is the other co-founder of Neurostrategy. Dave's background is in field service operations with over 20 years experience in asset maintenance, technical training programs, and spare parts management. Between the two of them, they have decades of business experience. They are involved in implementing AR at both the enterprise level and smaller companies such as startups. They have a substantial depth of experience on what drives value in a business. Anthony is a technical specialist from PTC's Center of Excellence, and he'll be walking us through a demo of PTC's latest product, Euphoria Instruct. So I'm going to get things started off with a question to the panel. I'm going to start with Bill. So augmented reality or AR has been around for a long time. It's started to appear in a lot of business settings in the last few years, but let's start with the obvious question. Bill, what is industrial augmented reality?
Yeah, that's a good question, good place to start. First, I think maybe a word or two on the context and backdrop for AR to help answer the question. Assets are continually becoming increasingly customizable and complex, and are more often today deployed across a global value chain. And as the shift is occurring, some of the traditional methods, such as the printed manuals, the training classes that we're familiar with, for building technical staff competency and ultimately mastery of their tasks, are becoming at the same time both more expensive and less effective. The challenge with traditional classroom training in particular has really never changed, though. Workers will forget about 50% of what they learn in a classroom within an hour, about 70% within 24 hours, and about 90% within AR, though, the AR technology provides users with new ways to access useful information and procedural support in the field. This is provided in the context of the assets they're addressing, and they can ultimately access this information exactly when they need it on demand. The AR, of course, is consumed with various different types of hardware, such as smartphones or tablets, AR wearables, and it overlays digital information on top of the physical assets that they're addressing, and also within their environments. So the AR can lock onto, if you will, the physical asset they're working on or the space they're in a way that those users can then interact with that asset's information, both three-dimensionally and hands-free.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. So that gives us a good idea of what AR technology looks like and what it can do. So I'm going to pass this next question off to Dave. The technology looks amazing, but really, what kind of problems can AR solve? I mean, Bill talked a bit about that, but why is AR growing in importance in business right now?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. A big reason for AR is the skills gap is accelerating. And the skills gap refers to the skills a company wants or needs its workforce to have versus the skills that they already have. There's a Deloitte report that's forecasting that US manufacturing will have 2 million unfilled skilled jobs by 2025. And that's more than triple the number from just 10 years ago. By next year, 2022, they forecast a quarter of all manufacturing workers will be over the age of 55, so soon to be departing their jobs due to age-based attrition. Then the story is similar in field service, with senior service technicians retiring and a real lack of skilled workers ready to come in and take their place at a similar proficiency level. So AR really helps address this, as it's not only used for training and field support, but also for improving things like employee productivity, employee satisfaction, even reducing safety incidents, and certainly lowering travel requirements as well. And now that the pandemic has added another wrinkle with fluctuating supply chains impacted by COVID, which means that there's new workers that really need to be quickly and efficiently onboarded and trained to appropriate skill levels so that they can address these demand spikes. Augmented reality is really the answer for this.
All right. Thanks. So, I mean, you obviously AR can business opportunities, so there's a wide context. You mentioned service technicians, so I'm going to get Bill to answer this next one. Let's focus in a bit more of that. If we look at industrial operational settings, you're working daily in these complex environments. What does that look like for somebody in that environment using AR? So maybe Bill, you can walk us through how you would actually use AR in those kinds of settings.
Yeah, and it is a very complicated landscape, but if we're going to try and maybe simplify it a little bit to make it a little easier to consume, we can think of AR is used in maybe 2 or 3 big buckets. The first big bucket would be procedural guidance for the workers, and arguably this is one of the most important. Procedural guidance utilizes the overlay of the AR-based instructions, equipment status or other performance data, right on top of the physical assets in the workspace for those workers. So this can benefit workers really of all skill levels to improve their efficiency, their quality, safety performance, all the while we're also capturing important procedure performance data. The second bucket would be product visualization. So this can take the form of augmented interactive overlays, all the way through to full digital twins of the asset. The ability to virtually place an asset in a space of your choosing opens a whole new realm for effective training or for simulations without the employees having to enter hazardous work areas, and without the need for costly training spares or equipment downtime for training. The product visualization also really provides new ways for us to support other functions, such as sales. We can allow customers to interact with products and equipment instantaneously and remotely without having to ship equipment, or in cases where equipment can't be shipped, it's too large or bulky. Final area would be, the third bucket would be remote assistance. So AR provides new ways for us to virtually connect remote experts, so they're not on site, and the in-field workers that are faced with problems, and allow them to connect around specific pieces of equipment. Really what we do with AR is we take the attributes of AR and we combine it with the more traditional video and audio call technology we're familiar with, and we provide enhanced visual mediums for both collaborating and for problem solving, again with experts that are typically remote, not on site.
Okay, that's great. So that gives us a number of great examples of where AR can actually be used in industry. So Dave, I'll throw this one at you. The next question I usually hear from clients is, what difference is that technology really going to make? I mean, change and digital transformation is hard. So what are some of the compelling numbers or metrics you've heard from either Neurostrategy customers or other companies that would really get people interested in the investment and the time and energy to actually introduce AR and make those changes?
Well, there's a few examples. So there's a company called GSI AGCO, and they're a global leader in agricultural equipment manufacturing. They implemented Euphoria AR solutions, and they reduced their overall training time by 60% by doing things like replacing countless hundreds of training slides with just a handful of AR experiences. Then there's another company called Bretting, and they're in the paper converting business. They used Euphoria Expert Capture to create step-by-step operating and service instructions. They not only saw a 25% reduction in the number of service visits they performed, but they were also able to cut their documentation and training time in half. And then closer to home here, locally, we're working with a large oil and gas company, and they've been testing some procedures using AR, and they saw their procedure accuracy improve by 68%. They also saw a 40% reduction in time for those procedures to be actually performed. So procedures are getting done faster, and they're getting done with a much higher degree of accuracy and safety.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks, Dave. So I usually the follow-up question to that is the question about how much is this going to cost me, right? We've heard a lot of stories from the early adopters of AR that spent significant time and budgets on getting these programs up and running. So when you hear those kinds of stories, it's easy to jump to a conclusion that AR is powerful, but it's too expensive for most people. So Bill, maybe you can talk about the stories from a few years ago versus what they look like now. Obviously, technology costs usually drop. So what do things look like today versus the early adopter era?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'll start by saying that there are countless stories of companies that got stuck in the pilot purgatory problem. Rooms full of programmers, architects, designers. That used to be the only way to achieve AR. High levels of effort, high costs, slow pace. Those were sort of the familiar stories. Layering on top of that, I would say, is another problem that AR is really just kind of cool, right? And it's easy to select your opening pilot use cases because they're neat, not because they're really solving any real business problems or creating monetary value for the organization. The combination of high costs to build at a slow pace with minimal value is not really a great place to wind up. So that's the That's the pilot purgatory problem that we've seen, historically. But today, really what's changed is we have some serious advancements, very much like in the form of PTC's Euphoria AR software that you'll see a little bit later here, that allows for low to no code production, allowing the subject matter expert to capture and author AR experiences without the support of the rooms full of programmers and such. At the same time, these users can also publish now at unprecedented rates. So depending on the length of the procedure, of course, some are longer than others, but to take a procedure and augment it, you can often now produce AR experiences, in Euphoria from start to finish in as little as just a few hours. Even if there are some, missteps, again, back to that pilot purgatory problem in selecting the optimal value outcomes, this rapid pace of creation allows you to compensate a little bit, allows you to build more than just the highest value experiences. I think a good example would be that we're working also with a company right now that's documenting procedures that are performed about once every 7 to 9 years. Now, the value won't be recognized really fully until those procedures are done again in nearly a decade, but that's okay, because the cost to produce those incremental experiences can really be trivial, and we can tackle them now.
Okay, that's great. So Dave, I'll get your opinion on this next question. So a lot of people, when they think about AR in a company, they think large enterprise companies. There's stories about Volvo, Lego, BAE, all having these AR solutions for both business and consumer experiences. So there's a lot of highly visible, successful AR experiences in big companies. Do you think AR is just for large companies, or do you, based on what's happened with your work with Neurostrategy, what's the range of companies that would be find value in AR, I guess?
Yeah, honestly, it is not just for large companies, not at all. We do value workshops with customers of all sizes to identify their use cases, where sometimes very small investments in AR can generate some rapid returns. Every customer's situation will be unique, but the value may come from things like improved first-time fix rate in a service organization, or increased asset uptime. Maybe reduced labor and travel costs, or maybe even by generating some revenues from new business models based on things like service contracts with guaranteed outcomes. For example, we're doing some work here with a pre-revenue startup, and this company is focused on providing a platform for product as a service offerings to manufacturers and field service organizations. They'll be using Euphoria AR to support their customers and to de-risk the fixed price services that they intend to offer the market. So a cornerstone of their business will be AR supported service offerings.
Okay, awesome. So you've convinced me to introduce AR into my company. So I'll ask this question to Bill. So you talk about the opportunity for AR driving business value. There's a lot of things AR can do. The obvious question is, where do you start? So Bill, if a Neurostrategy client came to you and wanted to explore opportunities in AR but didn't know where to begin, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, for sure. So despite what I said earlier about how the rapid pace of creation can allow organizations to build, a bunch of procedures, if you want to call them that, I'm still going to say I firmly believe the first step is to always really consider carefully how you're going to monetize the solution. Creating a rapid return on investment is critically important, particularly in the early game, to build momentum, support the uptake on the tools, and it also means that you're focusing on the right experiences, as you move into your scaling and you're rolling out in wider swaths across the organization. The second thing I would definitely recommend, and again we're a bit biased here, but select a platform like Ptc's Euphoria that offers user-driven, the low to no code experience creation. This allows you to move away from the very expensive production, but the platform that you select should also be one that lets you scale up to the full production photorealistic type augmented reality experiences as you wish, or as you grow your AR enhanced engagement, your execution capabilities over time. I think those two things are the critical first two steps.
Okay, so you talked about the steps. Let's talk about the when. I mean, if they came to you and said, when do we implement this? Do we delay it? What are the things we need to do first? What are some of the steps you might take before you actually put AR right into your company?
So some of the steps that you might take, like really, I guess the first thing is really to just get started, right? And there really aren't any reasons anymore why most companies of almost every size can't be deploying AR right now. Soon, I think AR, we're all going to see it's just going to be a routine part of both everyone's personal and professional lives. The risk really is now that as everyone is using AR and picking up pace dramatically in how they're deploying it, to wait longer means that you're just allowing sort of larger gaps to be created between you and others over shorter periods of time. So I guess some critical points maybe just I'll throw out there would be, capability barriers have been broken down. The manpower required to pull this off has been minimized. The pace of publishing is high. The cost per published AR experience is way down. Payback period on the investment can often now be measured in weeks, sometimes in days. And really all of these factors together sort of point me to a conclusion that every company, regardless of your size, regardless of your maturity, you should be evaluating AR right now. So I would say that's the one single most important thing that I would say.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Bill and Dave, those are some great perspectives on AR. What I want to talk, and we've already talked about this already, is when you think about implementing AR, you think about the cost, you think about the times. There's a significant amount of development time often when you build these things from scratch. You've got development times for delivery. You've got potentially apps going to an app store that need a full review and need to be approved. And one of the things that PTC is really focused on is building these low or no code platforms to really quickly build AR experiences. So right now we're going to go through a demo of one of PTC's newest solutions called Euphoria Instruct. And not only allows you to develop powerful AR solutions for business, but it lets you do it with a minimum of technical knowledge and very, very quickly. So I'll hand it off to Anthony Garner to walk us through that demo.
Yep. Thank you very much, Michael. So like we were talking about before, I'm going to go over Euphoria Instruct, and to talk about Euphoria Instruct at a high level, it's important to understand what it really is. What Euphoria Instruct lets us do is take the advanced computer vision technology that powers a lot of the AR aspects of our Euphoria suite and combines it with a frictionless, low code, low technical knowledge delivery medium. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So what I'm actually going to be going over are the three, I'll say, delivery methods for Euphoria Instruct. First, we're going to be talking from the perspective of that inline worker with his iPad or iPhone who's going through an experience that has been created with Euphoria Instruct. Then we're going to see as he goes through his experience, he's also going to be capturing information, and we're going to see what that information looks like on the opposite end for more managerial personnel. Sure, there we go. And then lastly, we're going to go over what it actually takes to create something similar to what we're going to be showing here at the outset. So here, this is our end user who's taking a look at his selection of procedures on his iPad, or this works just as well for an iPhone. Main idea, of course, is to deliver the content with what the user already has, as opposed to forcing them to have their own sort of technology or their own specialized equipment in order to view this. This can work on the phone that exists in everyone's pocket. And what you'll notice here is it looks very similar to design sensibility that you'll see in a lot of modern apps. So it's very easy for a newer personnel to get into, so a low barrier to entry as far as technical knowledge is concerned. So in this case, we have our recent downloads, or the recent things that we access. We have things that we marked as our favorites, things that we come back to over and over again. And finally, we have just all of the procedures that we've downloaded onto this device. And what that means is I can hold these procedures natively on my device, as opposed to having to have a Sterling internet connection in order to facilitate this. So what we're going to do is we're going to select onto this Ender 3 Pro inspection procedure, and here's our full bore step list, about 12 steps all in total for this procedure. So here we're going to click on Start Session on our iPad, and then first thing we're going to do is we're having to add in our serial ID just for the bookkeeping to see that this procedure has been done on the proper piece of equipment. Now, before we see any information on the actual procedure itself, we're going to go through some specific preliminary safety steps. Before we can even go forward, we are going to have to get our safety glasses. We're also going to have to make sure that the power is off so we eliminate any sort of electrical hazards. So this is not just the idea of the step-by-step procedure, but also including specific safety information that needs to be facilitated in order for this to properly be taken place. So here, what you'll actually see is this white silhouette of our machine that we're going to be working on. And what this lets us do is it lets us use the more advanced Euphoria computer vision technology, so we can actually map the information we're overlaying directly onto the real world equivalent. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this white guide view that we refer to it as, and we're going to match it up to our real world objects through the camera of our iPad. And then that's going to directly overlay onto the real world equivalent. So for this next step, step 3, which will check the cable E is connected to the correct location, it's going to give us direct wayfinding directions to exactly where it is we need to be looking and examining in order to properly perform that step. So if you compare this method to, say, the more standard method of someone going through a technical document that's 5, 10, 15, 20 pages long and making sure they're looking at it the right orientation, they know the exact way they should be working with it. This is a much more easy, much more visceral, and very, very quick way to actually go about this. So here, check the cable E is connected to the correct location. It is. So on our iPad, we're just going to click on the pass button. We also have the ability to look at some static photographic assets. So we click pass. So we're going to move on to our next step. So check that the cable E is connected to the correct location. So for that, we're just going to see another set of wayfinding arrows to the area of interest. And then we're going to move our camera downward, and there we can see it being designated. And again, we have a photographic asset that we can utilize to make sure we know exactly what it is we're looking for and talking about. Next, check the cable E is connected to the correct location. And again, we're going to be given wayfinding directions directly to what it is we should be examining and taking a closer look at. And for our end users on their iPad, this can be served up to them in a plethora of different ways. This can be scanned through a QR code, set through a URL within the within a learning management system, or it can be just downloaded natively to a standard iPad that's just within the facility for them to look at as almost a technical manual that they have access to. So for this one, we're actually going to skip over a couple of those steps to go to step 9, but they're all going to be designated as being skipped when we look at the end result of this. So our next step is going to be I'll say an examination or a test step. Put this frame on a flat surface to confirm that there is no rocking. So again, gives us wayfinding directions to exactly where it is we should be looking at, but this also includes a video asset for us to closer examine to make sure we know what we're talking about. So that one, as we can see, if we put this back and forth, it does rock. So we're going to mark that off as a failure. Step 10, we're going to make sure the voltage is set to the correct required voltage. And again, no muss, no fuss. I don't need to call anyone in the middle of the night. I don't need to go find a technical manual in order to view all this information. It's all right here for me to access at my fingertips. Then we're going to connect the power cable to system power and immediately make sure that it's actually functioning properly. So again, gives us directions to exactly what it is we're looking for. We're going to go ahead and plug in that power source. I'm going to click and turn that on. And our last step for this procedure is to go to the interface that we see there to the left. And if we didn't know where that was, we're going to again get those wayfinding directions to point us exactly where it is and perform the final boot up procedures for this Ender 3 Pro. So just like that, the person who has never seen this Ender 3 Pro and has not worked with 3D printers whatsoever can run through this inspection procedure without having someone over their shoulder babysitting them, making sure they're doing it correctly. So when we finish that procedure, we can see all the steps that we have selected and said yes, all of the steps that we skipped, and finally any of the steps that we marked as failure. So here we're just going to click on submit, and from there we're actually going to go into Euphoria Insights, and this is where I can take a closer look at all the different procedures that have been uploaded and processed by anyone within my organization. So here we see all of our Creality procedures, some other ones, and a couple of different pieces of equipment, and we can even filter down to exactly what it is we're looking for. So we're just going to look over the past 30 days of any of the procedures that have failed. And then it's going to down select to that, and we can even search further by just going directly into our search window, searching for our Ender Pro procedures. And if we move all the way over to the right, this is where we can see the procedure that we've just done. There's our serial ID, and there are the results for each and every one of those steps that we've taken. And the last thing we can actually do here is we can export this all entirely out to the CSV file format in order for this to be either viewed separately outside of the actual system or even imported into some other systems that might make use of CSVs. And the last thing I'm actually going to show you here is just how easy it is to make a procedure like this. So this is our Euphoria Editor. We've accessed this just straight from a standard web page. And in order to make something like this out, all we really need to do is just drag and drop and add in our additional assets as we would need to, because Editor can function pretty much as an asset library for us to cut, copy, and bring in whatever assets we want to utilize for that step. So in this one, we already have a starting procedure. And if I go over to the far right, we can see each and every versioning scheme for our Ender 3 procedure. So anytime someone's made a change to this, it's automatically up-rev for that. So we maintain a specific type of version control for this. And that means we can also decide to redeploy a previous version of this, or we can always set it so it's viewing to simply the latest version of our actual object. And in order to make a new step for our procedure, it's very, very simple. All we need to do is just click on that green plus button. This is where we're going to add our safety glasses step that we saw at the very outset of that. Once we add it in our text, then I'm just going to go and search for that asset. That's this case is going to be that safety glasses JPEG. And then we're going to drop that into our space here. And here we can either define our feedback, so we can say it's either a confirmation, meaning you can't move forward, or it's a pass or fail based on just a general inspection. And what you'll of course notice is as I'm making this entire process, it's a very, very simple. I'm using more mouse than keyboard. This is something that almost anyone can do when actually working in the system. So it's a very no code kind of environment, very low technical knowledge threshold to make something like you just saw on the outset when that on our end users experience. Okay. So we're going to add just a couple more steps here. This one's going to be a pass fail step. And this is specifically is how I'm going to show you we can bring in that 3D content that we saw at the very outset that allows us to dynamically show content relative to the actual physical space on the object itself. So first thing I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to bring in a photograph of the E-cable we're going to take a closer look at. We can also directly within the editor make dynamic edits into the actual system itself. So in case just this photo isn't good enough, we can go ahead and save that off and highlight that however we need to. We can do the same thing if we need to cut and copy videos or even remove the audio to relocalize it. And the last thing we're going to do here is going to add 3D to our procedure. And this is where we can make use of already existing CAD information that we might have in order to bring that into our environment. So here we have some visualizations of our Ender 3 CAD model. And once we bring that in, all we need to do is simply point to on our CAD model where that point of interest is. So this is going to be our E-cable that plugs in specifically to this area on our CAD model, which is going to point to that specific area within our physical object. And it's that easy to add that information. So here I'll just show you an example of how easy that is again. So it's going to be checked that cable E is connected to the correct location. Here we're going to bring in another image for our reference. And within the editor, it all functions pretty much as just an asset library for us to drag and drop however we need to and however we decide within our specific environment. And lastly, here, we're going to add in that additional point of interest showing exactly where our end user should be looking in order to properly perform this activity. And that is more or less Euphoria Instruct in a nutshell. The main idea is to bring in the actual full power of Euphoria's computer vision and spatial recognition technology in the most easy, the most frictionless way of actually creating this content. Someone like me or a subject matter expert can make this very, very quickly, very, very easily, and then deploy it very, very rapidly to that personnel out in the field. And if any changes need to be made, it can be changed and then redeployed just as easily. So now I'll pass it back off to Michael.
All right, thanks a lot, Anthony. That was fantastic. I'm going to turn it over to Connor for the Q&A session. We can go see. I think we got a couple of questions in the the chat so far. So Connor, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. Yes, we did get a few questions. Let me just pop this slide up just so everyone knows where to get in touch as it relates to the Neurostrategy team if you do have any follow-up questions that we don't get to today. So just to go to the chat and a few of the ones that came in, and maybe I'll direct this to Michael and Dave and Anthony, of course, if you want to chime in. One of the early questions that came on as we were talking about cost is, of course, there is the setup cost, but then there's the cost of keeping everything current, right? So new equipment, safety procedures, LMS management, et cetera. Do you guys have any comments on this and what you might advise to a customer with that kind of question?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take this one, Dave, just because I've dealt with this specifically in sort of industrial operational settings. The cost of maintaining manuals, whether it's, some people are still on paper, is often quite expensive. You've got to go back, you've got to find them, you've got to find potentially the original version of it. As you saw from Anthony's demo, going in and updating procedure is a matter of adding a new step or removing a step, and you've got a full version control available as well that lets you very quickly update and maintain. There's also, you think about things like operational excellence, where you're always trying to improve that process, your safety or your productivity, figuring out how those steps can be changed to meet. It's much easier to go back and change them using the software approach to those procedures. In terms of new equipment, I'd say there's two answers for that one. If you have a CAD model, like you saw from Anthony, you can basically pull that in and it automatically becomes a 3D model you can attach your procedure to. So that's very quick. If it's something existing or you don't have a CAD model, there's another tool called Expert Capture that lets you actually add AR markers to that equipment and very quickly do the same kind of thing, except real time in an actual setting. So the whole, PTC has really thought this through in terms of how to make this as simple as possible to make sure the document management and maintenance is as low cost as possible. Doesn't require a significant amount of investment, cloud-based as well. So it's not like you're having to handle the back end or the updates as well. So Dave, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that's well said, Michael. I think you've covered all the points there.
Okay.
Just another one that came in too. First off, Anthony, compliment on your demo, of course, great job. But one of the questions was related to how would you ensure that people, or in this case, maybe a service technician, are actually doing the procedure and not just checking off the boxes, or even truly passing an electrical test based on a meter. I don't know if Anthony, you want to take that, or if Michael, you want to chime in.
Yeah, Anthony can definitely talk how the technician would interact with the software, and yeah, exactly. That'd be a great question for Anthony. I can follow up after that too if you want.
So as a general rule, the way a technician is going to be fundamentally interacting with the software is the software is ultimately recording what it is they are entering into it. So it still, on a fundamental level, does require a certain amount of discipline to ensure that they're properly doing that. That being said, it's not that hard to go back through all the data through Euphoria Insights and take notice of that person who's just checking it off while their equipment at the other end of things is not being brought up to snuff, as it were. So from there, that's where you can actually, I'll say, pinpoint that bad apple, as opposed to the previous method where it's just a traveler and you're just basically checking off, you're hoping that it goes back right, or you have to go back through filing cabinets in order to see why did this thing that got a good check somehow malfunction when we got it out in the field.
Yeah, and I'll just add in a bit just from the OpEx perspective. So there's operational excellence, which is how to do things properly. Then there's operational discipline, which is you actually do things properly and actually follow the procedure. So it's always an issue. Yeah, you can have a great procedure, but if people don't follow it, you have an issue. So to Anthony's point, if you've got bad outcomes on the equipment, you can start looking at why those things are happening. There's other things where, for example, you can capture a photo of a particular point in the step if there's an audit that's required later on to actually capture that was done properly. So if you want to create checkpoints, and essentially from, not that you don't trust your workers, but from an audit perspective, sometimes that's very important to make sure the equipment is documented in a certain state throughout that procedure. So there's ways you can build that into the procedure. But ultimately, it comes back to you can't force people to do the right thing. You have to make sure that it's clear why that's important and why it's valuable. So.
Perfect. Thank you both. Anthony, just while we have you, one last question related to the devices. What kind of devices do you need for Euphoria Instruct? And maybe just give us a quick view into, the high level roadmap of devices that might be coming for that product.
So as of right now, on the end user side of things, really all you need is a standard phone or tablet, probably one that's came out in the last 3 or 4 years, that has the ability to cast with AR technology. So most modern iPads, most modern iPhones, I think the last time they did the check for, I think about 65 to 70% of the phones out in the market are AR capable for like things like Euphoria Instruct. On the CAD side of things, just from software, just about any CAD you can bring in can actually function along with that. So of course, Creo, PTC Zone, but as well as like SolidWorks and a couple of other ones. And it does, yes, Android and iOS and Windows Phone as well. Just saw that come out from Wayne. But as far as the roadmap is concerned, the ability to actually allow for wearables is definitely coming down on the roadmap. We preference the iPad and iPhone because that's the most ease of use and quickest time to value. Not everyone is prepared to arm their entire workforce with an entire fleet of HoloLenses or Magic Leaps, but we do know there is a necessity to keep your hands free when you're properly doing this procedure. So that's definitely down on the roadmap. And as well as expanding just our general, I'll say, portfolio of those phones and tablets and devices from like 65 to 70, probably all the way up to 90%, even higher if necessary.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I think this is probably the last question, then we can let everyone go. I haven't seen any others come in through the chat, but last call for everyone who's on the line still. But I'm going to direct this one to Dave. Dave, this one is, you spoke a little bit about the benefits, of course, of AR for businesses, but when you think of something like cost reduction, where do you think AR will really have the greatest impact on cost reduction specifically?
Well, for most companies, I believe the answer to this will be costs associated with training of their workforce. For field service organizations, I would expect 50% or more reduction in training time. So for example, if you're training a new technician, if it takes a technician a year to get fully up to speed and fully revenue generating today, with well-deployed AR, I think we could have them generating revenues in about half the time, so 6 months versus a year. The other areas on a P&L that I would expect some positive impact from using AR would be travel costs, or even the cost of invoice concessions or service guarantees. Or maybe even being able to operate with a lower technician headcount and fewer fleet vehicles to support those technicians.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. I think that just about does it for the questions. And I think regarding time, we're at about 3:45 Eastern time, so about 45 minutes. I just want to thank everyone who joined in today and was able to participate and engage with us. As a reminder, this session is recorded. We will distribute all the information to you for free in a follow-up email, so you'll be in touch with the Neurostrategy team within the next couple of days. But if any other questions come up, please reach out to them directly. You can find their contact information on that slide I was just showing, or you can, of course, just shoot us a follow-up email at any point. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. But again, thank you to our panelists and to Anthony for the demonstration. And thank you to all the folks that attended. And we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.